All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to OneClass. My name is Kevin. I'll be teaching some economics today. A little bit of a background about me. I hold both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in economics, and I also work as an economist on a day-to-day basis. I'm just going to run through, I think, 6 or 7 questions with you over the next 45 minutes or so. I picked some difficult ones today and some things I haven't worked on in a while, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the answer by our junior tutors, see if I arrive at the same answer, and just kind of talk through any steps I go through along the way. So we can get started here. Just going to make sure it's working. Looks like it is. Question 1, public goods. For each of the following commodities, and using the definitions of non-rival and non-excludable, please say if you can label the good as a pure public good, a partial public good, or a private good. Write a sentence justifying your answer. So just before we get started here, I should define non-rival and non-excludable for you guys. So non-rival means that one person's consumption does not affect someone else's. So if we are talking about a box of cookies and I eat a couple, that affects you because there are now less cookies for you to eat. In other words, they're a rival good. Consumption. But if I'm going for a stroll in the park and smelling the flowers, me stopping to smell the flowers does not impact your ability to smell the flowers, and me smelling the flowers doesn't take away from the scent of the flowers, so that would be non-rival. So we can say that one person's consumption does not affect another. And non-excludable is how it sounds. So non-excludable means that one person cannot exclude another from enjoying a good. So this we can think of like a private good is going to be excludable because the owner of the good can stop whoever wants to consume it from consuming it. But non-excludable goods, like maybe going to a public park. If you go to a public park, you don't own the park and you cannot stop somebody else from also going to the park. I'm going to pull up the Google definitions of each of these just to see if they word it any differently. But I think I've kind of said the gist of it. Non-rivalrous means that the goods do not dwindle in supply as more people consume them. Going back to my example, cookies. If I eat cookies, a box of cookies, and then you go to that box of cookies, there's going to be less because I consume some. Supplies are dwindling. However, me consuming the smell of flowers does not dwindle the supply of smelling flowers. Non-excludability means that the good is available to all citizens. So if it's excludable, that means it is not available to all citizens. So this lines up what I've said so far. And they've given, they would like to say either label the good as a pure public good, which is non-rival and non-excludable, a private good, which is rival and excludable, or a partial public good, which I believe is one of non-rival and excludable, or non-excludable and rival. So the first example, they say the Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona. And our junior tutor said that the Grand Canyon National Park is a public good because it's open to everyone and anyone can visit the park. So if you're at the park and I come visit, I'm not dwindling the supply of the park, so it's non-rival. Similarly, it's non-excludable. If you're at the Grand Canyon and I go to the Grand Canyon, you and nobody can stop me from enjoying the views of the Grand Canyon. The U.S. Patriot anti-incoming missile defense system. Our junior tutor has written the defense system of the country is an example of a public good as it protects all and is non-rivalable and non-excludable in nature. So if you're an American citizen, all American citizens will be protected by this anti-incoming missile defense system. Me being protected by it does not mean there's less protection for you. And assuming that we're both U.S. citizens in the country, you can't exclude me from being protected private because we're both on U.S. soil. Third, the ECN 130 Public Economics course at UCD. So our junior tutors read the Public Economics course is an example of a private good, as only those who have enrolled in the college can attend the course. It is not open to all. So it is excludable because anybody that did not pay the fee to take the course is going to be excluded from consuming it. It is rival in that there will be a set number of seats in the course. So one person getting into the course means there's one less spot for you to try to attend the course. Lastly, a 2013 Audi TT Fire Engine Red Coupe Quattro with Bose sound system. Is that an ad? Did I just read an ad? Junior tutor has said that earthquake forecast is also an example. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Earthquake forecast from the United States Geological Survey. They said that earthquake forecast is also an example of a public good. The information is available to all and thus is non-rival and non-excludable in nature. So me hearing the earthquake forecast doesn't take away from your ability to hear the earthquake forecast. Therefore, it's non-rival. And I can't stop you or anyone else from listening to the earthquake forecast because it is broadcast on a radio station that anyone can access. The 2013 Audi and Bose should pay me rights for reading this to you guys. Is going to be an example of a private good. It's excludable because whoever owns that car is not going to let anybody else drive it. There's probably a couple exceptions. And similarly, there are a set number of 2013 Audi Fire Engine Red Coupe Quattro with Bose sound systems available. So if I buy one, then there's one less for anyone else to buy. So I'm going to say excellent answer. That's correct. And we can move on to the second question here. Second question reads, where would a country want to be on the production possibility curve or production possibility frontier? inside, outside, or on the curve? Why? And how does a country make that decision? So to jog your memory on the production possibilities frontier, simple version would be two goods produced by the economy. Good one we can say is coffee and good two we can say is like tea. Only two things an economy produces. The production possibilities frontier is going to be the maximum combination of goods and services that the economy can produce efficiently. That's a terrible line. It's going to be bowed outward. And there are kind of essentially three possible locations you can be. You can be inside the curve, you can be on the curve, or you can be outside the curve. So point A, which is inside the curve, is going to be attainable, which means that combination of goods can be produced, but it's going to be inefficient because we could produce more of one good without giving up some of another good. So that's attainable, but inefficient. Did I spell inefficient wrong? You get the gist of it regardless if I did. So, for example, maybe at point A here, we can produce 2 coffees and 1 tea, and that's great. We can have that, but without giving up any coffees, we could be at point B here on the curve, and maybe at that point, we're consuming 4 coffees and 4 teas, and we can still have our 2 coffees. Similarly, we could also be at point D and still have that 1 tea. So without giving up any teas, we could instead have call that 8 coffees. So this brings us to points B, C, and D. So we're going to draw numbers for C. Maybe we'll call that 6 coffees and 3 teas. So B, C, and D are what are known as Pareto efficient or technically efficient points. And Pareto efficiency is when you cannot have more of one good without giving up some of another good. More generally, Pareto efficiency is a state when you cannot make one more person better off without making somebody else worse off. Pareto efficient. So say we're at point B, the economy is producing efficiently, and that they're producing 4 teas and 2 coffees. Say then that preferences change for some reason, and the people instead want more coffees. You can begin producing more coffees, but to do that, you're going to have to produce less teas. So maybe that looks like moving to the right along the curve, maybe moving from point B to C, or somewhere in between, or somewhere further down to point D. Lastly, we have point E, which is a point outside the curve, and this is preferable. We would rather be at point E than any of point A, B, C, and D. So it is preferable, but it's unattainable. Preferable, preferable, but unattainable. So if we draw down here, try to draw E in line with these other ones. So point E is a point where you can have, the economy can produce 4 teas and 8 coffees. Obviously that's preferable to B because it's the same number of teas, but you have 8 coffees instead of 2. And obviously it is preferable to D because you have 8 coffees either way. But at point E, you get 4 teas, and at point D, you get 1. Preferable to point C as well, because at C, you get 3 teas and 6 coffees, but at E, you get 4 teas and 8 coffees. So it's more in both categories. So ideally, we would be at point E or further out. But due to scarcity and constraints, the efficient amounts we can produce are characterized by the possibilities frontier, which is the boat outward arc. So that's a quick lesson on how the production's possibility frontier or the production's possibility curve works. To get back to the question read, where would a country want to be on the production possibility curve? Inside, outside, or on the curve? Why? And how does a country make that decision? Junior tutor. Our junior tutor said that the production possibilities frontier demonstrates the maximum combination of goods and services that the economy can produce efficiently using the available technology and resources within a given time frame. A country will want to be on the production possibility curve to attain the maximum productive efficiency. The goods and resources that can be produced by an economy plotted on the production possibility curve are considered to be technically efficient or Pareto efficient, while the goods and resources that lie beneath the curve mean inefficiency due to unemployed resources. So that refers to point A. Points outside the curve are unattainable because they require more resources than are available. So that refers to point E. We would prefer to be at point E, but we don't have the resources to produce at that level. To summarize, unemployment on a production possibility frontier would be a point inside the PPF. Full employment on production possibility frontier would be a point on the PPF. Outside the PPF, points are unattainable due to the lack of resources. So if unemployment was inside the curve and full employment was the curve, then maybe to get to point E, we would have to have technology increases so that each person would become more productive, or we would maybe need to bring in more labor so that there were more people working, and that would push the curve outwards. Trying to think if I have anything to add to that. Yeah, obviously, countries would prefer to be at full employment at all times. Of course, that's not always possible. For example, right now we're in a pandemic. As a result, there was a huge spike in unemployment as companies tried to minimize their losses. And I'll leave that there for a second. You guys can take a picture. And we can move on to question 3. Three, indicate whether each of the following people is frictionally unemployed, structurally unemployed, seasonally unemployed, cyclically unemployed, or not officially unemployed. So just to give us a quick reminder, frictionally unemployed is kind of when you're like in between jobs. So examples of that would be like when you're a new grad. So I imagine that a lot of you that graduated during the pandemic have had a harder time than normal finding a job because the job market is certainly not great right now. So you guys would be classified as frictionally unemployed or in between jobs. Another example might be when you move to a new city You left your job in the old city, said peace out to everybody and moved 6 hours away, and you need to find a new job when you're there. You'd be frictionally unemployed until you found a new job. Structural unemployment is when there is a demographic mismatch. So, for example, maybe there are a lot of older folks in the job market looking for a job after retirement just to keep them busy. But all of the majority of the job market is tech jobs. As a result, these retirees maybe don't have the tech skills that somebody younger coming out of school might. So although there's a pool of job candidates and a pool of jobs, the job candidates don't have the skill necessary for the jobs that are available. So these people would be structurally unemployed. We've got cyclical unemployment, I should say. And this is employment that moves with the business cycle. So booms and busts. So from maybe 2015 or 2016 up until the pandemic hit, we were not super, well, we were near full employment. The economy was strong. People were confident. As a result, unemployment was low. Of course, the pandemic hit and unemployment skyrocketed because there is the recession that came along with it. So the business cycle is the booms and busts. So unemployment rises in recessions and falls in periods where the economy is strong. So everybody that lost their job when COVID happened, I think the unemployment rate spiked to like 14%. Those people would be cyclically unemployed. Lastly, we've got seasonal unemployment, which is really just how it sounds. The example I always go to is if your job is a snowplow driver, you've got employment in the winter when it's snowing, but during the summertime where there's no snow, you're not going to have any work. Another example could be depending on the crop. Some farmers can't grow in the winter depending on what it is. So a woman with good job skills who cannot find a job due to a sluggish economy. Our junior tutor has written that a woman with good job skills who cannot find a job because of a sluggish economy is cyclically unemployed. Cyclical unemployment refers to unemployment that arises as a result of the cyclical trend in the economy as observed in the business cycle. So if they said women are unemployed due to a sluggish economy that is likely to be in a downward trend in the business cycle. In other words, in a recession, unemployment rises. This woman has good job skills, but she just can't find a job because the job market is dried up because we're in a recession. So that falls under cyclical unemployment. Second example was a poorly educated former telephone operator placed by a machine looking for work. Our junior tutor said that unemployment resulting from industrial reorganization, usually due to technological change, rather than fluctuations in supply or demand. Thus, a poorly educated former telephone operator replaced by a machine looking for a job is structurally unemployed due to the changing structure of the economy, or the demographic mismatch. That's correct. The last thing was they said that those were not officially unemployed. To be unemployed, you must be actively looking for a job. Otherwise, you're just out of the labor market. That we can move on to question 4. Question 4 reads, the demand and supply functions for a good are given by the equation P equals 80 minus 2Q and P equals 20 plus 4Q respectively. Part A reads, calculate the equilibrium price and quantity, and part B reads, calculate the consumer and producer surplus at equilibrium. The supplier pays an excise tax of 12 per unit sold. C, write down the equation for the supply function when the excise is imposed. D, recalculate the equilibrium price and quantity. And E, calculate the tax paid by 1, the consumer, and 2, the producer. I may not do this entire question. I might just do the first bit of it. We'll see how long it takes. So part A, calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. So if we were to draw a very tiny supply and demand graph here, we've got Q and P, and supply slopes upwards, demand slopes downwards, and at equilibrium, they have same price and same quantity. So what we need to do is isolate for one of these in both equations and then set them equal to each other. So here we've got price is 80 minus 2Q. And we've also got price is equal to 20 plus 4Q. Here we see that it's sloping downwards because it's negative 2Q, so we know that's a demand function. Similarly, we can see that the other is sloping upwards because it's plus 4Q, so we know that that is the supply function. So we're going to set them equal to each other. With that, we're going to get 80 minus 2Q. Going to equal 20 plus 4Q. Now we will group like terms. So left side we will make 80. Subtract 20 from both sides to get 80 minus 20. It's going to equal 4Q. Add 2 to both sides, plus 2Q. This comes out to 60 equals 6Q. We can divide both sides by 6. And we'll get that Q star equals 10. So our equilibrium quantity is 10. Because we just set the two equations equal to each other, we just need to plug this Q star back into one or the other in order to solve the price, the equilibrium price. So we'll plug it back in the first one, I guess. So we can say that price is going to equal 80 minus 2Q. Of course, we know that Q is 10. So price is then going to equal 80 minus 2 times 10, which is 20. Subtracting those, we will get P star. It's going to be equal to 60. Just make sure Junior Tutor did the same thing. They did. Cool. So our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price are going to be 10 and 60 respectively. and that's going to be the answer to A. We can move on to B. B says calculate the consumer and producer surplus at equilibrium. So if I draw this, I should probably actually just represent this graphically too for you guys. So we've got supply, and demand. And we know that the equilibrium quantity here is going to be 10. And we know that the equilibrium price is going to be 60. So next thing we need to do, well, first I suppose we should remember that this in here is the consumer surplus, and this in here is going to be the producer surplus. So if we look at our demand equation, which is 80 minus 2Q, when the quantity is 0, we know that the price is going to be 80, so we can draw that here. If we look at our supply equation, 20 plus 4Q, we know that when the quantity is 0, price is going to be 20. So we can draw that here. So we know the consumer surplus is this area, right? This area in here. And the producer surplus is going to be this area in here. So we can do the consumer surplus first. So this is a triangle, obviously. So the height of the triangle is going to be from this point to this point, or 80 minus 60. So that's the height. And our base, this point, we know that Q is 10, here Q is 0, so our base is going to be 10. And if we just left it at that, we would calculate the area of this entire box, but because it's a triangle, we need to divide it by 2. So our consumer surplus is then going to be 80 minus 60 is 20 times 10 over 2. It's going to be 200 over 2. So our consumer surplus is going to be 100. I will check in a second with what our junior tutor said to make sure I'm doing this right, because I'm just doing it off the top of my head. But I believe I'm on the right path so far. So the area in here is going to be 100, and that's our consumer surplus. Our producer surplus, on the other hand, is represented by this triangle here. So the top is going to be 60 minus 20. So the height of this triangle is from 60 to 20. The base is going to be the same as it was with the consumer surplus. So 60 minus 20 times 10. And because it's a triangle, we divide it by 2. I'm sure you guys remember the formula base times height over 2 for a triangle from your earlier math years. So 60 minus 20, we're going to get 40 times 10. Here I use a dot and an X for multiplication interchangeably. Probably bad practice. You should probably use one or the other, but I digress. $40 times 10 is 400 over 2, and our producer surplus is going to be 200. 100 and 200, excellent. Cool. So if the supplier pays an excise tax, basically that's going to get factored into the equation. It just changes the supply function from being 20 plus 4Q to 32 plus 4Q. And then you can rerun the same calculations with your new numbers. End result is you're going to get a lower equilibrium quantity and a higher price because there's a tax in the supplier. Yeah. So I'm not going to run through that just in the interest of time. But these are the two kind of general steps you need to take to, one, solve for equilibrium, and then get your consumer surplus and your producer surplus. Give you guys a quick second to take a picture of that, and then we can carry on. All right, number 5. Looks like we got more math, which is exactly what I want to do after a 9-hour workday on a Friday night. Number 9 reads, the wheat market is perfectly competitive, and the market supply and demand curves are given by the following equations. Quantity demanded is going to equal 20 million minus 4 million P, and quantity supplied is going to equal 7 million plus 2.5 million P, where QD and QS are quantity demanded and quantity supplied measured in bushels, and P equals price per bushel. So we've essentially got the same first step and second step as the question we just did. But the reason I picked this question is to show how a price floor affects things. So again, we know that quantity demanded is going to equal 20 million. I'm going to lose the zeros just for the sake of my fingers having to draw this. 20 million minus 4 million times the price is going to equal 7 million plus 2.5 million times the price. We can group like terms, so we can go 20 million minus 7 million is going to equal 4P plus 2.5P. 20 minus 7 is 13, and 4P plus 2.5P is 6.5P. 13 over 6.5 is going to equal our price. And so our P star is going to be 2. Our equilibrium price is 2. Well, I guess it'll be like what? 2 million, regardless. Similarly, if we then plug it back into one of the equations, we can say that quantity demanded is going to equal 20 million minus 4 million times 2 million. Quantity demanded is going to equal 20 million minus 8, and then QD, which is QS, which is Q star, it's going to equal 12 million units at a price of $2. So we've got our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price. I will graph this. So Q, P, supply, of course, slopes upwards. Demand slopes downwards. We know our Q star is 12. We know our P star is 2. I think we're gonna have to rearrange these equations for P now. Yeah, so isolating for P, we've got Q equals 20 minus 4P. And say 4P equals Q minus 20, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through the math. Or did I make a mistake here? 12, 10. Oh, we're just saying if Q is 0, then so if Q is equal to 0, then we've got 20 equals 4P. 20 over 4 equal P, which is going to equal 5. It's for our quantity demanded. So draw 5 up here. Similarly, for the other equation, we've got quantity supplied equals 7 plus 2.5P. What did our junior tutor do here? Oh, it just asks for consumer surplus. So we know that consumer surplus is this area. Right? So we can say, knowing the formula is base times height over 2. So we can say that it is 5 minus 2 times 12 over 2. That comes out to 3 times 12 over 2. 3 times 12 is 36 over 2 is 18. So our consumer surplus would be 18. That solves question A. So I'm going to let you guys take a quick picture that you need, and then I'm going to erase and draw back. All right. So 5B says, assume that the government has imposed a price floor at $2.25. So I'm just going to draw what we had here earlier: supply, demand. This was 12. This was 2. This was 5. But now the price floor has been set. Straight line. Price floor has been set at $2.25. And when a price floor is in effect, the quantity demanded is going to be less than the quantity supplied. And as a result, we are going to have a surplus. See what our junior tutor has done here. Oh, so they've just plugged in, I believe. Sorry, I didn't drew that big. Quantity demanded is going to equal 20 million minus 4 times the price. Here, price is going to equal 2.25. So that means it's going to be 20 million minus 10. And so the quantity demanded will be 10. So see the demand curve here, price drops there, crosses there, sorry. So the quantity demanded will be 10. Similarly, we plug it into the quantity supplied. Equation for quantity supplied is what? 7 plus 2.5 times 2.25, sorry. It's going to equal 7 plus 5.5, which is what? 7 plus 12.5. Is that correct? Maybe. 2.5 times 2.25 is to 5.625, so 12.625. Close, I get an A for effort. So as we can see here, the effect of a price floor that's above the equilibrium is a result of there being too much supply and too little demand, which means there's a surplus in the market. I think I'm just going to leave it at that for the sake of time because I know I'm already going over. So I'm going to say the gist of that is if a price floor is instituted, you take the quantity demanded and quantity supplied, and you can plug in that new price to those equations to get the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied at that price. And then the surplus is going to be the difference between the two. So we've got quantity supplied of 12.625 and quantity demanded of 10. So the surplus is going to be 2.625, which is 12.625 minus 10. I can move on here to question 6. Question 6 reads, what does this quote mean by John Rawls? First principle, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with a similar system of liberty for all. Second principle, social and economic equalities are to be arranged so that they are both A, to the greatest benefit of the least advantage, consistent with the just savings principle, and B, attached to offices and positions, open to all, under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. What our Janine The Tutor has written is that the first principle is that each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties, compatible with a similar system of liberty for all. Their explanation is that in the first principle, which comes first among the rules, the important point is that in the field of fundamental freedoms, no one can be more equal than another. Unfair treatment or injustice of different persons may destroy society. In one word, equality. It is important for any developed society to view their citizens as equals when it comes to issues like voting and working and things of that nature. The second principle, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged that they are both A, to the greatest benefit of the least advantage, consistent with the just savings principle, and B, attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. Explanation is that the second principle states the difference principle. Rawls was not favored by standardized equality. According to him, the yardstick for permissible inequality was to give the most disadvantaged a maximum of advantages. There exists a choice among the measures of equality, and only that satisfies Rawls, which yields the highest measure of benefits to the worst off. So if I remember correctly from grad school, Rawls is sort of famous for his idea of Rawlsian equality. And I think it stems from the idea that if you were to just be dropped into society, having no idea of what your class would be, what sort of setup would you prefer? Would you prefer it, say how it is loosely in the United States right now, where there is a small chance you may end up incredibly well off, have the world at your fingertips, or a larger chance that like you may have nothing or very little, or have less than most of society? Or would you rather be dropped into a society where equality was as close as possible, and maybe the benefits wouldn't be as high if you were a top member of society, but the bottom tier of society would not be nearly as bad, and you would be better off. And he says, not knowing where you would end up, you would prefer a system in which, I believe they said it here the best, a system in which the most disadvantaged had the maximum number of advantages. And what that looks like is essentially, instead of having, you may be dropped into a system where you could be very well off or very poor off. The system instead looks like this, where the worst off here are not much worse off than the best off. I don't really have anything to write or draw for that one. Just kind of what I stumbled through out loud there. Question 7, I believe, is our last question. Fill in the blank. Demand for this good is inelastic, elastic, or unitary elastic with respect to price. This is a normal or inferior good, as income elasticity is less than, greater than, or equal to 0. It is a necessity or luxury good, as income elasticity is less than, greater than, or equal to 1. Widgets and gadgets are complements or substitutes, because I'm not really understanding this question. Let's see what our junior tutor said. Looks like they just went through all of the scenarios, which is good. Maybe I'll do a quick little lesson. So, elasticity of demand with that ED is going to equal the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. Quantity demanded, sorry. There's essentially 3 scenarios. The elasticity of demand, absolute value of the elasticity of demand, I should say, can be less than 1, can be equal to 1, or it can be greater than 1. If it's greater than 1, we see that it's elastic. That means that the numerator, when there's a change in price, the numerator changes more than the denominator. So you're responsive to it. Unit elastic, the numerator and denominator will change the same amount. So your change in demand to a price change is going to move proportionally. And lastly, if it's less than 1, we're going to say it's inelastic. That means the percentage change in quantity demanded is not going to change very much when there's a change in price. So you're not really responsive to a price change. So inelastic quantity of demand is typically aligns with a luxury goods or goods you don't really need. Oh, no, sorry, I said that backwards. Inelastic elasticity of demand aligns with necessities, things you have. For example, you still need to eat food. If everything at the grocery store doubles in price, your quantity demand isn't going to change all that much because you need to eat to survive. On the other hand, if a good quantity demand, if the elasticity of demand for a good is elastic, that might correspond with a luxury. So, you know, maybe a lot of you tried to buy the PS5 when it came out the other day. Somebody got there first, and now they're trying to resell it for like $1,200. So the percentage change in quantity demanded is probably going to fall a lot because nobody really needs a PS5. And what you might have paid $500 for, or whatever it retails for, you're probably not going to pay $1,200 for. And if you did, wow. But our junior tutor, back to the fill in the blanks here. I think they've gone through every situation. Good on them. So all of the below sentences should be correct. If they're not, I'll stop and correct them. He said that demand for good is elastic with respect to price change. if changes in demand is greater than the changes in price. That's kind of what we just spoke about with the numerator and denominator. So if change in demand, the numerator is greater than the change in price, it can be elastic because the equation will come out to be greater than 1. Similarly, demand for the good is inelastic with respect to price if changes in demand are less than the change in price, for again reasons we just mentioned. And demand for a good is unitary elastic, or unit elastic as I've written, with respect to price if changes in demand is equal to the changes in price. That's what I was talking about, proportionality. You said that normal goods have a positive income elasticity demand. Inferior goods have a negative income elasticity demand. I always have to remind myself what the definition of inferior goods is. I think it's like when the price increases, demand increases with it. Oh no, it's when demand drops when incomes rise. So this is for things like Mr. Noodles and stuff you eat as a broke college student, but then you start working, you get a taste of that good life, and you don't want to go back to living off pizza pockets and Mr. Noodles and things of that nature. So they'll have a negative income elasticity demand. Luxury goods and necessities will both have a positive income elasticity demand, as I alluded to. But necessities will probably be inelastic, and luxuries will probably be elastic. Lastly, it's true that widgets and gadgets are complements because cross-price elasticity is negative. In this case, if the price of one good increases, then the demand for another good decreases. Yep, and widgets and gadgets would be substitutes if cross-price elasticity is positive. In this case, if the price of one good increases, then the demand for another good also increases. So substitutes are things like burgers and pizza. If I'm feeling fast food and the price of burgers has doubled, I'm probably just going to get some pizza instead. It's pretty much the same thing. Scratches the same itch. Whereas complements might be, like if I'm going out for a burger, you're probably pretty likely to get like a pop with it or some fries or whatever. Yeah. So our junior tutor did an excellent write-up there. I think that should be it. It is lovely. Thanks for watching today. I enjoyed having you. I really can never remember what to say at the end of the video. I think if you need to ask questions, there is a link in this description below. You can type in your questions if you have economics questions. Either I'll answer them or our other senior tutor, Ose. I think you can, there's a share button, you can share with your friends, like, etc. Thanks for, I guess I went an hour. I was only planning on going 45 minutes. But thank you for sitting through the last hour with me. I'll probably be on maybe Sunday night if you wanted to tune into that live stream. This has been Kevin from OneClass. Thank you for watching.